be laid in graves.
All right, welcome back to the Young Turks. I am your host, Cenk Uygur. And we got another movie review for you guys. Today we're going to review Brothers. We're going to do a rethink review, though. We're going to do it with John Kim. It's about a guy who went to Afghanistan. You're about to see the story in a second, and then we'll come back and talk about how bad the numbers behind PTSD, suicides, etc. are for the troops. So let's watch John's review first.
Hey, stand back! All right. Hey! You're a war hero, sir. I'm no fucking hero! I'm no fucking hero! You know what I've done? Hey, it's all right. Relax. Sam! Huh? Sam! Calm down. What are you gonna do? You gonna shoot me? Huh? Sam! Fucking shoot me! Fire! Shoot! Fucking go on! Jesus, shut the fuck up! This is a family matter! Shut up! Shut up! He's my brother! Just stop for a second! Just let me talk to him! He's my brother!
Hollywood has had little success addressing the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Films critical of the wars like Rendition, Redacted, and Lions for Lambs flopped at the box office. So Hollywood has moved its focus to the struggles of individual soldiers and their families, with movies like The Messenger and The Hurt Locker. The latest example of this is Brothers, the story of how a screw-up younger brother tries to fill the void left when his soldier older brother goes missing in Afghanistan, only to return home months later with a severely wounded psyche. With acclaimed director Jim Sheridan at the helm and starring three of the best young actors of their generation, can Brothers shake the war drama curse? In a word, no. Let's find out why. The brothers of the film's title are Sam and Tommy Cahill, played by Tobey Maguire and Jake Gyllenhaal. Sam, the older brother, is a straight-laced Marine captain who married his high school sweetheart Grace, played by Natalie Portman, and has two young daughters. On the flip side, Tommy is a hothead who's recently been released from prison. Sam Shepard plays the father of the Cahill brothers, a gruff Vietnam vet who doesn't hide his pride in Sam or disdain for Tommy. Sam gets deployed to Afghanistan where he and another soldier, played by Patrick Pfluger, are taken prisoner by Afghan fighters. In the film's most unrealistic turn, Sam is reported killed in action, even though no body is found, and Grace and the rest of the family accept this assumption. It's a ridiculous conceit to hang the whole movie on. I mean, have you ever heard of any family just giving up hope when a family member disappears and there's a chance they might still be alive? With Sam gone, Tommy straightens up and steps in to help, supporting Grace and becoming a father figure to her daughters, charmingly played by Bailey Madison and Taylor Geer. As the Cahills at home try to get on with their lives, we see scenes of Sam and his fellow soldier being brutally tortured by their captors. Sam is eventually rescued and returns home, where he struggles with the horrors of his experience in a family who no longer knows him. So essentially Sam and Tommy switch roles, a dichotomy that comes to a head when Sam's post-traumatic stress leads him to suspect an affair between Tommy and Grace. Despite Sheridan's talent for family drama, most of the characters come across more as archetypes than real people. We never understand why Tommy was such a surly screw-up or why he suddenly turns a 180 to become so likable and responsible. Grace is little more than the good wife, and Papa Cahill is so cartoonishly stern that he basically tells Tommy that he wishes Tommy had died instead of Sam, and that no one would care if he did. The symptoms of Sam's PTSD aren't well explained and seem to have little connection to what happened to him, which makes his transformation into an unstable paranoid as strange as Tommy's move in the opposite direction. The actors do a decent job, but there isn't much chemistry between them, so I never really believed their relationships. I was very put off by the portrayal of the Afghan fighters, who have all the nuance and depth of the Decepticons in the Transformers flicks. We're never told if they're Taliban, Al-Qaeda, or insurgents, since apparently it doesn't matter, or their motivation for fighting, like maybe they're upset that a foreign army from a Christian nation is occupying their Muslim country and bombing their villages. And while we're supposed to boo and hiss as they torture the soldiers, guess what? America tortures too. And even now, 20% of Americans support the use of torture. Yet messy and important details like this are never addressed. But perhaps the biggest omission in Brothers is the one thing I couldn't get out of my head the whole time I was watching it, which is, why the hell are we in Afghanistan anyway? Our freedom isn't being threatened, the Afghans don't want us there, we don't have a credible partner in the Afghan government, we don't have the soldiers to fight our counterinsurgency, our occupation is creating more people who hate us, and we don't have the money to pay for it. What is the compelling reason for sending soldiers like Sam Cahill there, where death or physical and mental wounds can ruin the lives of them and their families? By going out of its way to not say anything about the war, Brothers focuses on the poop, but diligently ignores the elephant in the room making it. And with that and its underdeveloped characters, Brothers, sadly, doesn't really say anything at all. I'm Jonathan Kim. This is a Rethink Review.
All right, John, I'm getting the sense you didn't really like the movie.
I was not crazy about this movie.
Okay. You know what the problem? One of the problems with these war movies is, you know, people say, oh, these Iraq war, Afghanistan war movies don't do well in the box office. But have there been any that are really good? Because the ones I've seen have just been okay, and some of them just been flat out bad.
Right. I mean, the one that's actually, I mean, I saw Stop Loss, which I thought was okay. It gets kind of rambly and sort of turns into like a road picture. But The Hurt Locker is really the one that everyone's talking about, although it had a really limited run and I think has only made like $10 or $12 million. But I saw that for a second time, and the way that that movie addresses the war and the people who fight it, and sort of a deconstruction of what heroism is supposed to be, it's by kind of showing that these three different soldiers, and that they fight for they go and are defusing bombs for different reasons. That one guy, this is the only way he kind of gets a thrill, and he's kind of like an eccentric artist, and one guy is like just a young guy who wants to kind of be safe, and another guy is a guy who wants to be really professional. But that's a really great movie.
All right, so I'll go see The Hurt Locker because I haven't seen that yet. On this one, since now because of your review, I'm not going to see it. Can I get a little bit of a spoiler? Because you said in the middle there, he suspects because of his PTSD that his brother's sleeping with his wife, but it seems like his brother is, isn't it?
No, I mean, it's in the trailers, but there's one moment where they kiss, but it's like, no, this is wrong. But it was like a moment of weakness, and
Oh, so they didn't even bang boots?
No.
Oh. Okay, I'm definitely not seeing the movie. All right. Now, before we get on the numbers, the second thing I got to point out is I love John's papers. Will you see this? John's ready. He's got numbers. It's spread out all over the papers.
This could probably be better organized.
Oh no, I like it. I like it. It's your style now. Yeah. All right, so let's do it. First, what exactly, for the people that don't know, what exactly is post-traumatic stress disorder?
Post-traumatic stress is basically when an individual has a traumatic event where they feel very, very afraid, but also very, very helpless. And so unable to do anything about it. And actually, a really interesting statistic I found was that there was a poll taken in 2006 of soldiers in Iraq, and it said 2/3 of them knew someone who had been killed or wounded, but fewer than 15% knew for certain that they'd actually killed a member of the enemy in return. So, I mean, in terms of, like, even when they engaged and tried to engage an enemy, they don't know if they got them, or, with IEDs, there's just an explosion. And you don't know who it was.
It reminds me of that experiment. It was a Skinner with the cage, and then they do the shocks. I think it was dogs. Might have been rats in the beginning. And then if you know when the shock is coming, then the animal is used to it. But if they do random shocks, then eventually the animal kind of shuts down. And we're also animals, you know, and those IEDs are like those random shocks. And of course that's going to affect somebody's psyche. So what are some of the symptoms?
The symptoms are nightmares, hypervigilance, sleeplessness, but there's a lot of different symptoms for different people. And there's depression, but sometimes depression can be by itself.
Like that guy in the movie from the trailers and from your review, he looks like he's just flipped the hell out, okay? Is that PTSD? Or is that an extreme case, or is that something different?
Well, I mean, in this, it's an extreme case. Like, the way they never, I don't even think they even say PTSD in the movie. And what Tobey Maguire goes through is sort of beyond the pale horrific. It's not just kind of like horrors of war and, like, your friends dying. Like, it's something really, really crazy, awful that he does himself. But it can cause just irritability. You can't relate to people. You feel like people don't understand you. Sometimes you don't like open spaces. Sometimes you don't like sometimes you don't want to leave the house. And I think in terms of the Iraq War, I think PTSD is even worse because that's happening in an urban environment, not terribly different from what you live in the States, where there's streets and cars and buildings and stuff like that. So you can imagine being in Iraq, in Baghdad, where you have to worry about every single window, every piece of trash, every single car. And then you come back to the U.S. and you're surrounded by buildings and cars and trash and things like that. I think it's even worse than, let's say, if you were in the jungle, because you come back to the U.S., you're not in the jungle anymore. Right,
and I can see how that would trigger their memories, et cetera. So let's look at the numbers then. How many troops have PTSD according to the estimates?
Okay, well, there was a Rand Institute study in April 2008 that said 350,000 would have PTSD, but a Stanford study, they put the estimate at 700,000. Because they were taking into account basically delayed onset of PTSD. And that's out of 1.9 million soldiers who've been deployed so far.
So that's a giant number because that gives you a sense of, if you take the 700,000 number, that's a third of the troops, right?
Yeah.
About, roughly speaking. Actually, a little more than a third. But, honestly, the anticipatory PTSD might be true, but I'd take the lower number. But even the lower number is gigantic.
Right.
So this is obviously not a minor problem in the Army. Does it lead to more suicides, or?
It leads to more divorces, more suicides, joblessness, poverty, drug abuse, alcohol abuse. Because also, like, soldiers are basically, I mean, I'm not a soldier, but they're taught, like, you have to work through everything. You have to tough it out. You have to survive. You have to adapt. And so, like, alcohol and drugs are self-medication. or people just trying to deal with it themselves. And one guy who works with a nonprofit for veterans, he said, people don't realize it's not until like their third DUI or their third job loss or their second divorce that they realize, hey, I actually can't deal with this by myself. And another article I was reading said that when you realize the rate of joblessness right now for vets coming back, I think the number that I read was 18% of vets are coming back and are unemployed or homeless, and that just helps them not be able to fit into coming back home.
And more of a feeling of helplessness, et cetera. You mentioned multiple tours. What happens to the rate of PTSD if you do multiple tours in Iraq or Afghanistan?
Well, the number for people who are on multiple tours right now is approximately 800,000. The rate of PTSD goes up triple or quadruple if you've been more than 3 tours. And they also found that it was interesting that the PTSD rates, if you were regular military, there was more PTSD for 24 and below because they were young probably and just didn't understand, had no idea what war would be like. For the National Guard, there's more PTSD for people who are older because they had probably been living civilian life and having jobs and families and probably never even thought they would go and fight. And so then all of a sudden being swept up into not just any war, but a particularly crappy, pointless war is going to, it's just people lose their whole faith, their whole underpinnings.
What's the purpose? I mean, that makes you feel more helpless and hopeless, et cetera, because, you see these, your friends dying and you think, well, what was the point of that? And then what do we get in there? No, we got a stronger Iran in Iraq. Okay, but anyway, so, it makes me think, though, John, too, with Afghanistan. Now, we have the escalation that Obama put in there. What's going to happen is there's going to be a lot more troops that are doing multiple tours because of that. And so that's going to lead to more PTSD when they come back home, more joblessness, and it costs a lot of money to treat these folks. How much, do we have an estimate of numbers on how much it costs? Or
this one group called Swords to Plowshares, which is a San Francisco-based nonprofit for veterans, they estimated that there would be about 1 million veterans will be treated by the VA at a cost of about $1 trillion over 40 years. And but at the same time that there's a big backlog in terms of the VA providing funds for people with or evaluating their cases. And apparently it takes if you come home and you submit saying that you have PTSD or you think you do, it takes about 5 to 6 months for that to be processed. And if the VA says that you don't, it can take 4 to 5 years to appeal the decision.
Okay. And finally, look, by the way, this whole thing is, when you think about that $1 trillion number, I don't know if it's true, but that's such a big number that when we look back at it, was the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, I was in favor of the Afghanistan War from the beginning, right? But looking at the numbers, I'm not even sure that's worth it. It can't be worth it with those numbers. Let alone the unbelievable human cost. But the amount of money we're spending on these wars is ungodly, and we're going to spend for the next 40 years.
Yeah, and there's also the idea that, I talked to Linda Bilmes, who co-wrote the $3 trillion war, and she said a lot of costs of the war are never even calculated, where the loss of income for a soldier who's either wounded mentally or physically or dies. That's a lot. What about family? You have to take care of a wounded soldier, so maybe they have to quit their job. Or they have to drive someone to have their appointments and things like that. It goes on and on and on.
All right, and finally, give me the classy Bush administration. At one point, they realized they got this massive PTSD problem, right? And they're like, oh, it's going to cost a lot of money, and we want to hide the cost from the U.S. taxpayer because they don't really want to pay for it. So what do they do? What action do they take?
Right. In March 20th, 2008, an email was leaked talking about what they should be doing about PTSD. This was sent to psychologists, social workers, and VA employees, and this was what they said. Quote, "Given that we are having more and more compensation-seeking veterans, I'd like to suggest that you refrain from giving a diagnosis of PTSD straight out. Consider a diagnosis of adjustment disorder. Additionally, we really don't or have time to do the extensive testing that should be done to determine PTSD."
As always, classy. You send these kids to war, they come back with problems, and then you tell people, oh, pretend they don't have problems. And as John just told you, if they say you don't have PTSD, it's going to take you 4 to 5 years to appeal it.
And they used to actually, to claim PTSD, you had to give evidence of what happened to you, whether like a report or some sort of like eyewitness account of what happened to you. And also, I mean, when you think about it, like this is something else I found that, and it's perfectly, you can understand it from their mindset, but when PTSD was first kind of coming to the fore, sort of in the fallout of the Vietnam War, conservatives said that it didn't exist. They said it was they believed that it was a disorder created by anti-war activists with a political agenda, and they thought that this would transform ordinary men and women into chronic sufferers if they were said that they had PTSD.
I'd like to go have them tell that to the at minimum 350,000 troops who now have it. But look, here's the thing. Would some of these guys have been depressed anyway? Maybe. Depression is a thing that's largely chemical. It can be affected by outside forces, like if you go to a war multiple times, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't want to oversimplify, right? But have these wars aggravated it? Come on, you'd have to be crazy not to think so.
Especially on multiple tours. I mean,
right.
Yes, you could get in a car accident and have PTSD, but when you're going 3 or 4 tours where you're shooting at people and they're shooting at you and blowing you up.
I know, and a lot of those conservatives who claim that, of course, have never been to war, right? And so it's easy for Dick Cheney, who got 5 deferments, to say, well, PTSD, what name so? No, it's just some liberal stuff, because he's never been there, he doesn't know. All right, John, excellent reviews as always. Rethink Reviews on Huffington Post, on YouTube, rethinkreviews.net. Go crazy, okay? We'll see you next time.